Love it. All right, let's move quickly into college football. Do you want to talk Wazoo? Because they don't even play this week. We can just talk about their win, or we can talk about Washington's ugly, ugly loss and what will be an interesting game this weekend.
Let's talk UW so we can end on a high note.
Deal. UW in that was previously week 9 for college football, with them having bye weeks, which is still weird to me with college football. They lose 31-17 against number 13 ranked Indiana University after College Game Day. A tough game for UW. I think we both expected it. We both went into last week not feeling very confident about this team, and we were proven right. I think it's there's not really anything else to say. Do you have any specific notes before we dive into some stats?
I think this game went remarkably like we predicted it would.
Yeah.
Just once again, patting ourselves on the back a little bit. I think we hit this nail on the head. My biggest unique takeaway was I was surprised how much Will Rogers struggled, considering how really good and consistent he's been for so much of the year. He threw his first pick, I think, against Michigan, or maybe the week after. But it was like this guy was not throwing picks. Finishes this game with 2 picks and no touchdowns. So, I was surprised and disappointed with the way he played. Contrary to that, I was really impressed with the way Jonah Coleman played. He continues to be an outstanding running back and kind of the shining light of this offense in certain ways. But other than that, we hit the nail on the head. Too much offense, putting too much pressure on this team, and they just overcame.
Yeah, I think when you look at this line, you look at Jonah Coleman's stats and you think 19 carries for 104 yards, and you're like, why are we not giving the ball to this guy more? He doesn't fumble, he doesn't do anything wrong, and I feel like we should be feeding the beast, and instead we're trying to get Will Rogers hot after throwing 2 touchdowns. And granted, it's kind of, we've talked about it a lot and how you can get down and just have to pass more. But Washington was in this game, I guess they got down pretty early and it was kind of a tough comeback. But I think at one point it was 14-17 and Indiana just kind of pulled away at the end. But definitely tough looking at it. And now at this point we're 4-4. I think it's time to let Damon Williams Jr. cook. Like if I'm being honest, like we just have to get this guy reps at the quarterback position, start looking at next year, because as a Big Ten team, we're not going to make the playoff. We're not going to do anything spectacular. We might not even get to 6 wins. We might not get a bowl game this year. Like we play Penn State and Oregon in the final 3 weeks of the season, and we play USC next week, who I was confident that we would win against up until the Iowa game, and now I'm just scared shitless. It's going to be a tough stretch, and this is now about preparing this team for the future.
Wow, that's a hot take, and I love it. That you're already. We came into this season talking about how Will Rogers was like the college quarterback, and you're already ready to hand it off to the next guy. I understand the reasoning going into that. I hope you won't be surprised that I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen. But Will Rogers is a senior. He's not going to be here next year.
Somebody that they think will be less successful than Rogers has been.
Yeah.
But you might be right about what's best for this program going forward.
Yeah, Will Rogers is going to be a senior next year. Or this year. He's already a senior. He's going to be gone next year. I'm sorry. He won't be a part of this program moving forward. And it's like, we need to build this program for the future, because Jedd Fisch, as great as it is to have Will Rogers here, and this is weird to say, but like if Kalen DeBoer were here, do we think that Will Rogers was going to be the guy to make this team that much better in the Big Ten? Like, I don't think Will Rogers.
If Kalen DeBoer was here, we were going to be getting Milroe. He'd be transferred.
That's fair. That's a whole other discussion, I guess, when it comes to transfers. But if they had Will Rogers here, DeBoer goes to Alabama, and Rogers enters the portal and comes back. Like, this is the guy that DeBoer had picked, and I don't think this team is. Jedd Fisch is not the best coach. We've had a lot of, or I guess he's a good coach, but he's not the coach that we were expecting coming in. We've had a lot of coaching mistakes with this offensive line, penalties, all that kind of stuff. And those things set a team back. But
that's all the stuff I was expecting not to see from him. I thought he'd be like so clean and that we would lose in other ways. The fact that we're losing with like penalties and coaching mistakes is really disappointing. I thought we would be avoiding all of that stuff with Fisch.
Yeah, I wonder if some of that is just on the players. Like we don't know what goes on in the locker room. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes. But maybe it's Will Rogers trying to do too much from the line of scrimmage, just, changing plays, doing random things. They get delay of games. They get false starts, anything like that. That's on both the quarterback and the coach. And maybe they're just not synced as a duo there. And like I said, maybe it's time to get Damon Williams Jr. that time with Jedd Fisch for the future, because that's where this team is going to shine.
Sure. I hear that. Or, hopefully maybe they can just, obviously they've played a tough schedule. They just lost to the number 13 team in the country. In my opinion, a team that's better than number 13 and should be a college football playoff team in Indiana. So they've got USC and UCLA left in games where they could potentially be up big. And maybe that's a natural place to get Williams in to get some reps. The problem is the other last two games of their schedule are the number 1 and number 3 teams in the country. It's like, no, you need Will Rogers at the helm. You need a steady hand. Those are going to be loud games. They're going to be intense. I wish I was looking forward to these last 4 weeks more than I am.
What I want from this team is them to actually get a lead and then be able to hold it. Like, I just want them to score a touchdown with Coleman and then just be able to run the ball, because they pass so much. And I don't think Jedd Fisch wants to do that. I think we've seen Jedd Fisch with Arizona really rely heavily on the run game and then have one good receiver and be able to work that. And I just don't think that this team was ready for this type of offense. I think they've been behind every single game basically, and they have to throw more than they want to. You have to establish the run game. And Coleman is a running back that you can do that with, but they've just been unable to do it.
It's been so disappointing. There is nothing. We've talked about this. I say this all the time. I say there's nothing more frustrating too much, because there can't be that many things that are the most frustrating. But one of them is having a dominant running game behind a dominant running back and not being able to lean on it, because between your defense and between offensive mistakes, you're constantly behind. It's so true. This Washington team, the way it's built, should be a run-first team. Jonah Coleman has been so good, but they can't lean on him the way they need to. It's very frustrating.
Yeah. And I think, we kind of got off track with the Indiana discussion versus just talking about the team. So I think we hop on that real quick. Jeremiah Hunter had a decent game. Kaleki Latu had a decent game. Both of those guys are tight ends. Like, our tight ends looked great in this game. Giles Daxon had 2 catches for 11 yards, and they got him involved because he was able to score a touchdown on a rushing play. But this team was not able to pass very well at all. It was a lot of checkdowns in this game against Indiana. And their deep threats were pretty lackluster. And I don't know if that's because of Will Rogers. I think, personally, it's because of the offensive line and their inability to buy Will Rogers time. So I just think this team is not built for the passing game and playing from behind. And when that happens, you can't really go anywhere from there. You gotta rebuild a little bit.
Yeah. An underrated aspect of what you're talking about with those tight ends too is the way that in football, when you have dual threat tight ends, and that means tight ends that are talented blockers as well as route runners, how well tight ends complement your running game. And by that, what I mean is both of those guys are more than capable of blocking up the line of scrimmage, which really helps Jonah Coleman bust out some really solid 7 or 8 yard runs, which brings the defense up, which means now those tight ends feign a block and then run up a seam, and there's nobody there because everyone's coming up to try to block the running game, and then you hit the tight end for 16 yards. So next time, you've got your linebackers sitting in position trying to cover those seams for the tight ends, and it opens a hole for Jonah Coleman. And it's this really nice cyclical, helping, one person help another type of situation with your running game and your tight ends. It's got me thinking that maybe UW's biggest problem is that they're kind of trying to coach and in certain ways trying to build a team that can replicate last year's, attacking down the field, dominant quarterback, dominant receivers offense. And maybe their best offense is tight ends and running backs, and maybe they overcommitted to the wide receiver and quarterback position.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I think it's such a rare thing to be able to work with 3 dominant wide receivers and a quarterback that's awesome. And I think football right now, and this is a whole other discussion, but football right now is just a sport that's played from the quarterback and wide receiver standpoint. It's really hard to get a team that's super focused on the rushing game and have good tight end play and just be kind of solid in the short to mid game or mid range game. And I just think that is where this team would thrive if they allowed themselves to. You're totally right there.
Yeah. And that's what a team like Boise State does. Yeah, obviously,
yeah.
Coleman's not Ashton Genty, but that's how they do it. Of like, in a way, they almost have an advantage going to every game because defenses are primed to defend receivers and down the field, kind of like in the NFL with the too high safety. That's how defenses play in their base. So if you can come in and say like, no, our base offense is running the football, it can really throw defenses off, and it makes them change some fundamental aspects of how they play. And suddenly you have a built-in leg up in a game. So, yeah, there are a lot of frustrating things about UW football this year, but part of me feels like they kind of tried to build in another way, and they've kind of found accidentally that they're meant to play in a different way.
Yeah.
And the tension between those two things has led to some disappointing results.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's talk quickly about this upcoming week against USC. USC is 2-4 in the Big Ten Conference. They're not necessarily performing super well, and this is a matchup where one of these teams has to come out on top. They're both performing subpar when it comes to the Big Ten. How do we feel?
Feel regretful that we left the Pac-12, I think, is the takeaway between these two teams. Both of these teams are looking up at Oregon with a disappointed frown on their face. Yeah, this is a team where, as you said, one team has to come away. And honestly, I feel pretty good about UW in this matchup. The one thing they've proven capable of doing is taking care of lower caliber teams. I think USC's offense will not be capable of putting the pressure on UW's offense that some of these last couple teams have been. And if UW's offense is comfortable, I still think that they are dangerous. Mostly to the point that we're talking about. They have a good running game, really good tight ends, a solid quarterback and wide receivers, no matter what you think about them. And their defense can do enough. I think they could be better than USC on both sides of the ball. I feel pretty good about UW. And this might be the last win of the year, so I better feel good about it.
We will beat UCLA. UCLA is so bad. I want UW to treat this as a Big Ten game. I want them to run the ball and be super great defensively. That's all I want from this team. Establish a lead, make this game go quickly. I want this to be a 2.5-hour game where USC's defense is on it for an hour and a half, and just enjoy that presence and be what the Big Ten wants its teams to be, because we've proven that we can't do anything else.
Put on Michigan helmets for a week. I don't care what it takes. They can play that way if they force themselves to, and I think they can find success.
Yeah. So I think the matchup predictor is kind of crazy because USC is favored 67.6% of the time apparently, and the spread is -2.5 points in USC's favor. So it's definitely an interesting matchup, but I do think UW can come out on top here if they play this well.
Fair enough.
All right, let's jump to Wazoo, the 22nd ranked Washington State Cougars. We're excited. They finally broke the top 25. They're 7-1. Huge season for them so far. Off a tough game, honestly. 29-26 against San Diego State. John Mateer accounts for 4 touchdowns of the 4 touchdowns that were scored. And
that's all of them.
That's all the touchdowns. He goes 21 carries for 42 yards, so not really efficient in terms of rushing the football. And then he's got 19 completions through 27 attempts. Mateer obviously is just kind of the do-it-all guy. We've been talking about it all season. Anything big to note about this game, John?
Toughness, grit. I think honestly this was a really big win for them. San Diego State 3-4 on the season now with this loss, but I think they put up a heck of a fight. I think it was a really competitive game, and I was impressed. I continue to be impressed at Wazoo's ability to dig deep. I think Boise State is the only game this season where the second half came around and they were clearly just outclassed, and they were not able to. They were physically unable to rise to the occasion in that game. But in every other game this season, Wazoo has proven able to rise in big situations and pull away when you think they aren't going to come back. This is a team in this game against a talented San Diego team. They were up 14-6 in the second quarter before allowing 3 straight touchdowns by San Diego State. They were down 26-14 with 13 minutes left in the fourth quarter. There are teams that would have rolled over, but John Mateer has no fear. He led this team on a quick minute-and-a-half scoring drive, capitalized by a 34-yard pass to Carlos Hernandez, who had an excellent game. The defense made a stand. They got the ball back, and they took the ball all the way down the field. John Mateer, not efficient on the ground, but he scored 2 touchdowns with his legs, including the 2-yard run to take the lead, and then they hit a 2-point pass. But, I was just impressed, one, by the grit and toughness of the team in general, by John Mateer's lack of fear and ability to make plays. We've talked about it time and time again. Not great on the ground, 42 yards and 2 touchdowns, I'm not going to complain. But 260 yards and 2 passing touchdowns without any interceptions really impressed me from him. And then their defense, allowing 3 straight touchdowns to San Diego State is not what you want to see, but they came up big in the fourth quarter in those last couple of drives to get timely stops and make this comeback possible by Wazoo. So my big takeaway was they rose. They rose to the occasion.
Yeah. Also a big bend, don't break type of game from the Washington State defense. San Diego State was able to outclass them in yards passing and yards rushing. They had, I think, 50 more total yards. And Wazoo, San Diego State came away with 3 field goals early on in this game, and that's just kind of what they had to settle for because Wazoo was able to stop them when they would get into the red zone there. So really good game, I think, overall by this Wazoo defense against what was an effective San Diego State offense. Like I can't fault them. They kind of played that like UW did against Wazoo, and Wazoo was able to hold on to it just like they were able to do against UW. So a nice game for them, and we are hoping to see them continue to push their way towards that college football playoff game.
Yeah, and you know what? The fact of the matter is this was their last biggest hurdle to end the season undefeated because in the Mountain West, obviously tops is Boise State, and they got eaten alive by Ashton Genty. But next up is Colorado State, San Jose State, and Fresno State. Wazoo got the wins over San Jose and Fresno State. And then next up is San Diego State. Wazoo got that win tonight. Utah State.
I think you're looking at basketball. I did this last week, buddy. I think you're looking at basketball.
No. I'm looking at their standings right now.
Oh, you're looking at their standings. I'm sorry. I thought you were looking at their
No. I'm talking about Mountain West standings currently,
Gotcha.
right now. Boise State is number 1, and then I think it's San Diego State number 2, Fresno State, San Jose State. So yeah, they didn't play Colorado State, but other than that, they've beaten or lost to all the top 5 teams in the Mountain West. Utah State is a much easier win. Utah State is not as good as they've been in recent years. New Mexico is not good. Neither is Wyoming. So 3 of their last 4 should hypothetically be easy wins. All that leaves is the Pac-12 championship game against our Oregon State Beavers. For this team to go undefeated, you know what? Getting up to number 22 is so big for them right now. We said this was the week that they could do it, and they finally did. And it's so big for them because once you have that number next to your name and you continue to win games,
you can
Yankee has no choice but to continue to let you climb. That number's next to your name now. People are going to be seeing wins. They're going to be seeing other teams lose. That number has to climb. The number that they're looking for is 12. They need 4 wins and a little bit of luck to get there, but I think they can. Yeah,
I think, this Pac-12 championship game is as big as it will be. Oregon State's not really that good this year. They're 4-4 at the moment. And Wazoo's got a pretty easy cakewalk of a schedule to finish out the season. This was, I think, looking at it, this was their big week. They've got a bye this upcoming weekend, and they'll play Utah State next weekend. So we'll really dive into that game, I think, next week. But for now, I'm excited for this Wazoo team. I agree with you. They're going to climb as long as they keep winning. They could definitely end up, if they end this season 11-1, like there's no reason that they should not be in the top 12 teams.
Yeah, and I do think they still need a little bit of luck, and they need a good friendly push from the committee. But the good news is Big Crimson's a favorite of college football. Every single game day you're seeing Big Crimson fly behind the stands. I think this is a team, especially with a quarterback as fun and dynamic as Mateer, you want in the college football playoffs. You want to see them out there. So, they still need some dominoes to fall to get there, and they need to do the most important thing, which is take care of business the next 4 weeks. But I think there's a really good and interesting chance that this team could do it, which is, so fun. One of a million reasons why I love the 12-team format. I screw you if you miss 4 teams. It's so dumb. 12 is going to be way better. I'm hoping for this Wazoo team.
You've been attacking the fans of NIL or anti-NIL, and now you're saying screw you to you're attacking the old fans.
Yeah, correct. Just die and get it over with. It's a new generation, and we're deciding what we want. Pro NIL, pro 12-team playoff. Eat it.
All right. With that, I think that's it on the football discussion. Do you have anything else you want to say?
No, I'm all burnt out. I just gave all my energy on that last rant.
Yeah, we've been talking for approximately 2.5 hours at this point, so we hope it's not super obvious.